back with our next class. In today's class, we are going to discuss photosynthetic protist. So as you already know, photosynthetic protists are of three types: dinoflagellates, diatoms and euglenoids. So let us start our discussion with dinoflagellates. Now first of all, dinoflagellates are golden brown color photosynthetic protist. They are mostly marine rather than freshwater. Now, regarding the locomotion, as the name itself suggests, dinoflagellate, isn't it? So they are going to possess flagella. Now they are mostly biflagellated and they have a very peculiar spinning movement that is provided to them by their two flagella or the position of the flagella. Okay, so that's why we call them Hirling whips. Because of their peculiar spinning movement, we call them Hirling whips. Okay, now the body of the dinoflagellate would remain surrounded by a rigid core that's made up of cellulose. Okay, and it's going to be called as theca or lorica. Do you remember, theca or lorica is cellulosic. Alright, now theca or lorica consists of two groups like this. Suppose this is the structure of a dinoflagellate. So we have two groups in the entire of the body. One is transverse, another is longitudinal. Okay, the longitudinal groove is known as sulcus, whereas the transverse one is known as girdle or cingulum or annulus. Alright, now from the girdle one flagella rises out and from the longitudinal sulcus one flagella will arise out. That's how they will spin and give rise to a peculiar movement. That's why we call them Hirling whips. Okay, now see, the flagella both being different, we call it heteroconflagellation. One of the flagella, that is the longitudinal one, is going to be narrow and smooth, whereas the transverse flagella is going to be ribbon-like. Alright? Now, the photosynthetic protists they are, so that's why they have to possess photosynthetic pigments in the chromatophores. These photosynthetic pigments are chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, beta and alpha carotene and xanthophyll. The xanthophyll that's mostly present is peridinin. Peridinin. Okay. Now, reserve food material is carbohydrate and oil. Okay. And the nucleus of dinoflagellate is quite large in size and it is called mesokaryon. There are certain unique features to the mesokaryon. It consists of condensed chromosome in the interface and do not possess histones. And moreover, in the mesokaryon, the nuclear division when takes place, the nuclear membrane and nucleolus remains intact. They do not disappear. Okay. Next, pusule. It's a specialized cell organelle that's present in the dinoflagellates, helping in their osmoregulation. That means to maintain the salt-water balance inside the cell. That being said about the general characteristics or the structure, now regarding the reproduction. The reproduction in dinoflagellates occurs by asexual and sexual mode both. Asexual reproduction occurs by cell division, whereas sexual reproduction that has been reported is by isogamy or anisogamy. Okay. Regarding life cycle pattern, which we have discussed already, you know there can be two types of life cycle patterns, either zygotic meiosis for haploids and gametic meiosis for diploids. So in dinoflagellates, a few members can show gametic meiosis and a few can show zygotic meiosis as well. Okay. For example, zygotic meiosis, Serratium and Gymnodium, whereas for gametic meiosis we have Noctiluca. So that means Serratium and Gymnodium, they are haploid, whereas Noctiluca is diploid. Alright. So now a few important facts regarding dinoflagellates. PSP, paralytic shellfish poisoning. dinoflagellates, there is a specific member called gonulus. Gonulus is going to secrete certain kind of poisonous toxins in the surrounding water. Okay, the name of the toxin is called saxitoxin. Now, gonulus being a autotrophic or a microscopic protist, it is also taken up by many other organisms present in the aquatic medium as food. Now, especially the sea shellfish, they will be taking or consuming gonulus as food. So, in that case, saxitoxin will enter the shellfish, right? But saxitoxin do not affect the shellfish negatively, okay? So, they can easily digest or assimilate that. But suppose a shellfish containing saxitoxin, it enters the human body, okay? A human being consumes a shellfish containing the saxitoxin. Then in that case, saxitoxin can be highly poisonous to a human. It then can cause a disease that's called paralytic shellfish poisoning. Okay? So it's going to be caused by gonulus. Alright? Next, red tide effect. Again, gonulus. Okay? Gonulus, it grows in abundance on the sea surface and it makes the sea surface appear reddish in color. As you know, these are golden brown color protists. So when they will grow in abundance on the sea surface, they can make the sea surface appear red in color. Okay? This is called red tide effect. So with red tide effect as well, the organism which is associated is gonulus. Alright? Third and the last point about dinoflagellate is about bioluminescence. Now, bioluminescence is a kind of a phenomena in which the sea surface will glow in dark. Why? Because there are a few members of dinoflagellates which emit light due to phosphorescence. Okay? As they will emit light, they will make the sea surface glow in dark. A few examples are Noctiluca, Pyrodinium, etc. So these are important points related to dinoflagellates. One is paralytic shellfish poisoning, another is red tide effect, and finally bioluminescence. So with that dinoflagellates being done, next we'll discuss diatoms. So diatoms are also photosynthetic protists and they are also golden brown in color just like the dinoflagellates. Fine. They are popularly known as protistan algae and also they constitute a major part of the phytoplankton. They are equally distributed in freshwater and marine habitat and a few are also found in terrestrial habitat as well. So let's see their general characteristics. First, they are golden brown color photosynthetic protists which I have already told you about. They are the chief producers of the ocean. Okay, means they are going to produce more than 50% of the total organic matter that are formed in the aquatic system, aquatic ecosystem. The locomotion of diatoms only occurring with flagella. Yes, sometimes in the reproductive phase it might occur with flagella, but mostly locomotion occurs by mucilage propulsion. I hope you remember mucilage propulsion. We have discussed it in the previous class. Here the cells will release thick mucilage in the direction opposite to the direction of movement, isn't it? Now, they are free floating because they are phytoplanktonic. They are free floating in nature and they are free floating. Why? Because they possess lightweight lipids in their cell that helps them to remain afloat. Okay. Next, the cell wall. If you remember the cell wall of dinoflagellates now. See why every time I'm taking the reference of dinoflagellates here? Because while you study about the protista, you have to be correlating. You have to compare and study. That's how you will be able to score more of marks. Okay. So see, in case of dinoflagellates, the cell wall was present and it was made up of cellulose. Here there is a important difference. The cell wall of diatoms is made up of cellulose, fine. But along with that, there is a very important thing present, that's called silica. So their cell wall has cellulose impregnated with silica. And that's what makes their cell wall highly rigid. So rigid that it becomes nearly indestructible in nature. And this indestructible cell wall of the diatoms is known as diatomite or diatomaceous earth. The diatomite or diatomaceous earth has a lot of commercial importance, which we'll be discussing later. Now, the cells of the diatoms are known as frustules, okay? And the frustules comes in two types of symmetry. One is bilateral, that means the cell can be divided into two equal halves from only one plane. That's called bilateral symmetry. Also, in case of frustules which are bilateral, we have a term for that, that's called pinnate. So bilateral symmetry will be known as pinnate. Example is navicula. On the other hand, those of the diatoms which have cells which have radial symmetry are called centric. Okay. Now, what is radial symmetry? A particular structure which can be divided into two equal halves from many planes. That will be known as radial symmetry. The example will be Melosira. Alright. Now, the cell wall of the diatoms or the frustules can have two unequal halves. The upper half is called epitheca and the lower half is called hypotheca. So it's going to look like this. Suppose this is the upper half and this is the lower half. The upper half, as you can see, is slightly larger than the lower half, and they are going to remain in a manner as if they would fit into each other like a soap box. Okay, just like soap box has a lead and a base, and the lead and the base will fit into each other, just like that epitheca will fit into hypotheca. Alright, this is a very important point for you to remember. Nucleus that remains inside the cell wall is going to be centrally located. But in case of diatoms, mostly the cytoplasm remains peripherally and at the center remains a large vacuole. Okay? So in that vacuole, the nucleus will remain suspended with the help of some cytoplasmic strands. Alright? Now, photosynthetic protists they are, so of course they will possess photosynthetic pigments. Now these photosynthetic pigments which are present in the diatoms would be again similar this time with the dinoflagellates. They also possess chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, beta carotene and xanthophyll. The xanthophylls are diazoxanthin and diadenosanthin. On the other hand, in dinoflagellates it was peridinin. Alright. Now, the reserve food material, again you have a difference here. The reserve food material in case of diatoms would be chrysolaminarin, which is also known as leucosin. Leucosin, alright. Likewise, the last thing is about reproduction in diatoms. The reproduction in diatoms again can occur by two methods, that is asexual and sexual. Asexual method occurs by binary fission. Okay, asexual mode of reproduction occurs by binary fission. Now, one very interesting thing. See, during the binary fission in diatoms, suppose this is the diatom that I have made, right? When binary fission will occur, when binary fission occurs, the epitheca and hypotheca will separate out. Why? Because diatoms undergo transverse binary fission. So these two will separate. So this is the hypotheca, this is the epitheca, isn't it? So these two will now behave as daughter cells. And the daughter cells which only possess their epitheca, so that the hypotheca will later on secreted by the cells. Later on, the hypotheca will get automatically secreted by the daughter cells. So what is actually happening? The asexual mode occurs by binary fission. And which type of binary fission? Transverse binary fission. So that the epitheca and hypotheca of the parental cell will separate. And when they separate, they will behave as epitheca of the daughter cells. So that later on, hypotheca will be secreted by the daughter cells themselves. Alright. Finally, the sexual reproduction on the other hand will be occurring by isogamy and oogamy, and life cycle pattern in case of diatoms, because diatoms are mostly diploid, so they will show diplontic life cycle. And as you already know, diplontic life cycle means they will show gametic meiosis. Alright, they will show gametic meiosis. So this is another difference. Like in case of dinoflagellates, you have seen few members will show zygotic meiosis, few members will show gametic meiosis. But in case of diatoms, they are mostly diploid. That's why they will mostly show diplontic life cycle and gametic meiosis. Alright, so this being the general characteristics of diatoms. Now for a few important facts regarding diatoms. So now for a few important facts regarding diatoms. First, I have told you already, the cell wall of diatoms consists of cellulose plus silica. This is a very unique combination that makes the cell wall of the diatoms highly rigid and nearly indestructible in nature. So the silica shells of dead diatoms, okay, those which dies, they will sediment out in the seabed. And then they are extracted out from the seabed for various commercial utilizations, and we will call it diatomite, diatomaceous earth or Kieselguhr. Okay. Now, what are the commercial benefits of it? Because the nature of diatomite, because it has silica after all, it is rough and gritty. That's why it is used as filters in the brewing industry and also in the sugarcane refineries. Alright. Next, it is also used as metal polish. Fine. It is used in as a major component of toothpaste. Likewise, it is used for insulation purpose, for making insulating bricks or insulation in refrigerators, also to make soundproof rooms, and finally it is added to the panes to increase night visibility as well. So many things can be done with diatomite or diatomaceous earth. Next important fact about diatom is that they are a good water pollution indicator. They can indicate water pollution. Fine. And the last and the most important fact is that when sexual reproduction occurs in the diatoms, there will be of course a zygote formed, right? So the zygote that is formed in the diatoms during sexual reproduction is known as oxospore. Alright, so these being the important facts regarding diatoms, let us move to the last, that is euglenoids. So euglena is mostly found in freshwater habitat. It is not found in marine habitat. Okay, so mostly freshwater, and another important thing, mostly freshwater and also in stagnant water bodies. Okay. Now, the body of euglena, as you can see in the diagram, it is spindle shaped. Means it has a blunt anterior part and a steep or a sharp posterior part. That's what gives it a spindle shaped appearance. The cell wall, this is a very important difference. Cell wall in euglena is absent. Like you have seen in dinoflagellates and diatoms, the cell wall is present, right? Rather, the cell itself is completely covered by the cell wall, having an armored appearance, right? But here in euglena, cell wall itself is absent. Rather, what is present instead is an elastic flexible membrane made up of protein that's called pellicle. So, pellicle is present instead of cell wall. Okay. Now, locomotion in case of euglena is by flagella. Okay, flagella will be present. So this being the flagella that is present in euglena, and this is going to be helpful in locomotion. Also, in euglena there are two flagella being born, so they are biflagellated. But here there is a twist. See, the two flagella arises here, right? These two are the flagella. But out of the two flagella arising, both will meet at a point. This point is called paraflagellar body. Paraflagellar body. From the paraflagellar body, only one of the flagella will arise out. The other one will not grow further. So if you observe a euglena under the microscope, you will see only one flagella. Okay, it will seem as if it is a uniflagellated organism, but otherwise it is biflagellated. One of the flagella will remain inside the cell and will not grow further. Okay. Now, see, in the entire cell, from the panicle, certain kind of strips, parallel strips have come out, isn't it? These parallel strips you can see, these are known as myonims. Myonims are present. These myonims will allow the entire cell to have a contraction and expansion type of a movement. This contraction and expansion type of movement is called metaboly or euglenoid movement. Okay. Next, the apical end of the euglena, as you can see in this part, it consists of a mouth-like cavity that's called cytostome. So this mouth-like cavity is the cytostome, followed by a narrow canal. That canal is known as cytopharynx. And the cytopharynx finally end into a basal reservoir. So this is the reservoir. Okay, so the apical part of the cell consists of three parts: an opening called cytostome, then a canal like cytopharynx, finally which ends into a reservoir, basal reservoir. Okay, fine. From the basal reservoir actually comes out two granules called basal granule, from which the two flagella arise and meet at paraflagellar body. Okay, now see, paraflagellar body is this. Right? Just adjacent to it, you have another structure here. This structure adjacent to the paraflagellar body, this is known as stigma or eye spot. Okay? It is known as stigma or eye spot. The stigma or eye spot consists of an orange color pigment that's called astaxanthin. Okay, now the function of paraflagellar body and the stigma or eye spot remains the same. That is, they both will act as photoreceptor. Means they will be perceiving light and they will direct the organism towards optimum light. Alright. Now, another important thing about euglena is that they consist of a contractile vacuole. See, this is the contractile vacuole. Contractile vacuole. The contractile vacuole will help in osmoregulation. That means to maintain salt-water balance inside the cell. Fine. Now, the mode of nutrition in euglena is the most important and it's the most unique as well. Euglena, it is autotrophic in the presence of light, whereas heterotrophic in the absence of light. This kind of nutrition is called mixotropic nutrition, which is a very unique feature of euglena, due to which it is known as a connecting link between plants and animals. Okay. Now, the photosynthetic pigments are going to be present, see, surrounding the nucleus, this being the nucleus. We have these strands, these are the chloroplasts, and they contain the photosynthetic pigment. So these are the chloroplasts containing the photosynthetic pigment. Photosynthetic pigment elements are chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, beta carotene and xanthophyll. Okay. Here the difference is chlorophyll B. In the rest of the photosynthetic protists like dinoflagellates and diatoms, you have seen chlorophyll A and C is present. Okay. You have seen chlorophyll A and C are present. But here we have chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. B is the important difference. Now, reserve food material is paramylon. Now see in this cell, in the middle portion, you can see these granular parts, isn't it? These are called paramylon granules. Paramylon granules consist of paramylon, and paramylon is chemically beta-1,3-glucan. Beta-1,3-glucan. Finally, the reproduction of Euglena. The reproduction occurs by asexual mode. Asexual mode mainly occurs by binary fission. Now, in case of diatoms also binary fission occurred, but binary fission in diatom was transverse. In Euglena, the binary fission that will occur is going to be longitudinal. It is going to be occurring like this, as per longitudinal plane. Okay. So, binary fission, that is longitudinal, that will happen during favorable condition. During unfavorable condition, Euglena will undergo cyst formation. Alright. And finally, sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction in Euglena has not been reported yet, so is absent. Okay. So this is all for the photosynthetic protist. In the next class, we'll start with consumer decomposer protist or slime modes. Thank you.